Welcome to the Moulding Health Show. Our goal is to leverage the wisdom and experience of our healthcare practitioners to set you on a path of self-discovery and healing. These insights, coupled with a multidisciplinary approach to each area of interest, should provide an invaluable resource to everyone looking for a better approach to health. In this episode of the show, we speak to Sally Baker about postnatal depression and birth trauma from a social worker perspective. Sally Baker, welcome to the show. We're really glad to have you on board. So I've been looking forward to this for a while. And I was just telling Shaz, we've got the social workers really nicely represented, on the show. We've had Paula on and Lisa and now yourself. So thanks very much for doing this. We really, really appreciate it. And maybe just to kick it off, tell us a little bit about yourself. And, we're going to be speaking about postnatal depression and traumatic birth. So maybe why you got involved in those type of areas of interest.
Well, thank you for having me and thank you for representing social workers. Sure. Why did I get into this? Many, many years ago, I was really fascinated with birth and I became a birth doula. So I started attending births and was a full-on birth junkie, I might add, just fascinated by the process of pregnancy, of birth, of transforming into motherhood. And it became more and more of a passion for me. And I moved from being a full-on activist in the beginning, now understanding much more the trauma aspects of it and developing my social work private practice to focus on also the trauma elements of this phase of life. So it just fascinates me. I'm a junkie.
I like how you say that. I'm a junkie. But that's actually quite interesting. And the difference between that, there's postpartum and postnatal depression. What is the difference between those two?
Well, it's antepartum actually, which would be before the birth, or postnatal, which would be after the birth. But we consider that entire phase together. And we actually refer to it, even though most people know it as postnatal depression, it's perinatal mood disorders. And again, perinatal covers that whole phase. And if I might add, even though we focus on the depression part, very often it's actually more like anxiety or a combination of depression and anxiety. Sometimes it's rage, full on angry, furious rage. And then there can be also other aspects to it too. So it isn't just depression, but it's during that pregnancy, birth, and postpartum phase.
So thanks for clarifying that. That actually makes a lot of sense. But it's always interested me in terms of, so why does it happen? A certain woman more predisposed, I'm saying women because I'm assuming it's mainly women that go through this, although, I could be wrong. Maybe it's men that go through it as well, in terms of the whole process. But so why do the patients go through this? Are certain people more predisposed to it? In your experience or opinion?
In my experience and opinion, certain things can make you slightly more predisposed. So depending on how much stress you have before, events and incidences that happened in your childhood, experiences that happen during the birth, during the pregnancy, postpartum, even things that are going on before. So events can make you more susceptible. Also, if you have a history of depression, that can also make you slightly more susceptible. But then it can also happen to absolutely anybody.
Okay.
So it's both.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that as well. We've got two kids, and obviously, I think the first one, with Kiara, we weren't quite sure, what to expect, and I suppose that's part of the reason is that it's such a life-changing moment. Or process that, you don't really know how you're going to deal with it. You can be, I used to say even before I got married, I want to get everything in control, everything in place, and then we have children. And, I think when you start the process of marriage and having kids and stuff like that, you can never control all of those aspects. So I can definitely see it. And I see, with Ingrid as well, I think, with Kiara, it was actually very difficult. And I think with Tristan was maybe slightly better, I suppose. But that is is a big thing, I think, in terms of dealing with it. So how would you normally help a patient with this? I mean, so I'm assuming a patient actually comes to you and says, or books an appointment or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I call them clients. Social workers tend to call our clients clients. Generally, women find me. And by the way, quite a lot of men have postnatal depression too, more and more. Now that we have a world where men are allowed to own their feelings more, they're also allowed to say, "Hey, I'm struggling." So women find me, and very often they get referred to me by a midwife, by a gynecologist, by their pediatrician, by a psychiatrist, a lactation consultant. So other people in their system realize brilliantly, notice, are asking the right questions, and notice that these women need extra help, and then they come to me. I would say every interaction with every woman is different because it depends what she needs. A lot of what I do is normalizing and updating expectations. We live in a world of unrealistic expectations of what motherhood and fatherhood and parenthood is going to feel like and be like. The focus in the pregnancy is so much on the baby and not on the parents and who you're becoming. You said it so nicely, Oliver. Your first child is the one that turns you into a parent, transforms you by rite of passage into this parent person you're going to become. So adjusting expectations, helping people to acknowledge the grieving that they're going through. It's not what they thought it would be like. People having to do this during this time of COVID, even harder. They're isolated. They don't have the support systems they used to have. Parents overseas can't come and visit and support. It's a really, really tough time. So it's having to adjust to already an adjustment. It's an adjustment within an adjustment.
I know Shez has a question, but I can't let this one go until I've finished the thought pattern. But so I like what you said about normalizing expectations, and I think that's such a interesting term. I don't think I've heard that before, but I mean, I definitely resonate with it, and I suppose coming from a close-knit family, because as first parents, I mean, you don't really know what to do, and I would think we probably read more books on parenting than our parents did. But still, there's this expectation from extended family and whoever else. I found even with Kiara, when we went to Morningside Mini Clinic, and even the nurses have their own expectations of what you should be doing. And I think, it's actually interesting that you say it's a normalization of expectations, which I find refreshing. And if we had to go into that, what would that typically be? How would you normalize expectations?
By hearing them in what their original expectations were. So hearing the dreamy picture, the idealized perfect parent they were going to be with this perfect sleeping baby they were going to have, and the wonderful birth they were going to have, where everything would go to plan. And so, and that's not what happens, and that has to be grieved and understood. And then just coming down to earth. To a large extent, parenting is boring. It's repetitive. It's a lot of giving to the other. Women have to move. The mothers move from I and my life and my focus. And if you've come from an interesting career, you've been on top of your game, you've been validated, you get a salary at the end of it. It's, you had interesting conversation with colleagues, you're stimulated. And then you go to land with a baby. It doesn't talk to you. It cries. It poops and poops and poops. You got to figure out all these things, like breastfeeding. That's so natural. No, it's not actually. For most women, it's not natural. It has to be learned. Both of you have to learn that. That's a normalizing and unrealistic expectation. And there are many, many, many of them. It's all the way. Yeah, adjusting to this postpartum body that doesn't look anything like what Kim Kardashian's body looked like when she had her baby. Normalizing expectation.
So just carrying along that same train of thought, Sally, you said earlier that a lot of your clients tend to find you through a lactation specialist, or maybe, mom and baby classes, psychiatrists, psychologists, etc. What sort of things would a person be on the lookout for in, a potential partner or family member that they think might be suffering from postnatal depression?
Beautiful question. I would say one of the biggest ones is how much do you not feel like yourself anymore? Because the mothers will tell you, this is not me. I don't feel like me. There's this loss of the self, loss of wanting to do this, a wish to run away, a fantasy that I hadn't done this. Can I undo this? Where's the Control-Alt-Delete button? Now, to an extent, that's normal to think that sometimes, but to want to really run away, she's needing extra help. In an ideal world, all caregivers who are working with mothers, pregnant and afterwards, would be asking questions about, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Are you sleeping? When the baby sleeps, can you sleep? These are questions. If everybody was asking them all the time, it would help. There is something called the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale. It's freely available online. It's 10 questions which women can ask, and it scores it up for you. And there's actually been research done in South Africa that's shown that that women just filling in that form, they feel better because it's normalized and they're heard.
So that is amazing, and we definitely, with your permission, we'll include that in the show notes, because I think that's something that's tangible, and I like that you actually back that up with. There's actually results for it, to show that, which I find pretty interesting. And I think also, it's like Kiara's, 13 now, but I think 14 years ago still. I can see the difference even with me as a person and with Ingrid as a person, and where we are right now. So I really love this conversation, because I think probably we've told therapists before, because we speak about like parenting as well, and everyone says the parents need a timeout. It's almost like you need like the study guide on how it's going to change you, because even though you might think about it, you don't really know that you're going to be going through this, and I would say, not to say support group, but definitely more thinking and more support around the whole thing. And I because you normally go to a gynae and that's about it. But in our experience, the gynae doesn't refer you to anyone else to say, this is actually a big moment. Maybe you should be speaking to this person or that person. And it's interesting that you mentioned midwives as well, because I had a friend of mine, and his wife had a practice, and I think they eventually sold to Life Hospital because they're now in Australia, and she said something similar as well. Like patients or clients would choose her because of that additional assistance they got through the whole pregnancy process. And I would smile, because she would say, clients would phone her up at 11 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock in the morning and just say, something doesn't feel right, or, something's happening here. And she would, all smiles, would say, how can I help you? And I'm like, there was no way I'm doing that. But she would do it with a smile, and I'm sure that's what your clients experience from you as well. Is that how it normally works? Just that support structure around it?
Well, I'd like to think I offer some support structure, but I would agree that mothers groups, and there aren't enough of them, are vital for mothers to have colleagues, to have other people that are going through this at the same time as you. That, the rest of us who did it 13 years ago, or in my case, more than 20, we don't even really remember what that's like to be so tired and be woken up all the time and be demanded from. So to have other mothers who are also going through that make a huge difference, plus find the solutions. I would caution women, when you're finding a group, whether that is on Instagram or on Facebook or in person, find a group that makes you feel good. Find a group and women that empower you, that make you feel like this is manageable and I can become a strong mother and a competent mother, not a situation where you feel less than or isolated or ashamed. That's not a good group for you. Find a group that empowers you and supports you in the way that fits for you. And that would include caregivers, whether that's me as your therapist or your gynae or your midwife or your lactation consultant or the well baby clinic nurse, whoever you're interacting with. Try to go for people that respect you and empower you.
So, I think that's so important that, whether you're a new mother and you are struggling and you're finding a group, that you find somebody or a group that empowers you. But I think the same needs to be said for new fathers. You mentioned earlier as well, fathers' entire worlds change when a baby is born. And I think as men are starting to become a lot more, like you said, in touch with their feelings, it's not frowned upon anymore to be in touch with them. I think fathers also, if you're struggling with that new shift, should also be looking for, again, groups, colleagues, someone that you can just talk to help with this. On that side, though, Sally, if a person has suffered from postpartum depression with their first child, is it likely that they're going to have the same recurring depression on the second child?
That depends. So hormones, physiological things can play a factor. I think it would also depend on how it was dealt with after the first pregnancy and birth and postpartum experience. So did she get the help she needed? Are things changed in her system this time? Generally, it's easier to have a second baby than a first because you're not trying to do it perfectly. You also realize they're not quite as fragile as they were. Like with the first one, you're convinced you're going to break it. By the second one, you realize these okies are quite tough, actually. So there's a little bit of leeway, more so. I think if you have had postpartum depression or anxiety or struggled, I think it's really important to get help and put things in place so that you can get help really, really soon if you need it. I think that's the big difference, is probably the access to help. First time, you're much more likely to suffer alone in this world of ours that thinks you've got to do everything on your own. Me, independent. You cannot raise a child, me, independent, on my own. This is a group effort. It's a village, it takes a village to raise a child. It really, really does. So I think that would also be a difference. Women are scared if they've had that in the first time, they will be scared to go in the second time. So let's try and get you the help that will make it easier.
I do want to say this, and also taking full recognition of what Shaz said. In my experience, expectations on women are way higher. And I just think for everything, it's almost like the woman has to be strong. They have to be stronger. They have to do everything. And I remember the one time we went to a therapist or a doctor, and I took the kids. And the practitioner says, is your wife coming along as well? And it was almost like this expectation, that the wife has to be there. But we live in a world where I think men are a lot more inclusive in the process, whereas I think a generation, 2 generations back, probably there was less so of that. So do you find that? I mean, this is more a personal question. Maybe it's not related, but do you find there's a lot more expectations on women in terms of the actual development of the child, and that probably causes some of the issues around it?
I think we do as a society still put a lot of pressure on mothers and women, and they put it on themselves too. I think it's the rebound from the feminist getting your power back thing. But I'd also agree that the dads have changed. I mean, in the 15, 16 years I've been doing childbirth and parenting preparation classes, the dads have changed. They want to be involved. They are interested. They want to do this. They want to share. And often I have to, not often, but quite often, I have to say to the moms, let him in. Let him do it. He's capable. When a woman is struggling, or when people are struggling, their worlds get smaller. I'm generalizing, but your world gets smaller, and then you want to control and micromanage and control and do the bath like this and change the nappy like this and hold him like this and burp like this. This micromanaging, which is a sign of a postnatal or perinatal mood disorder or a trauma, results in the dads being pushed away or the partners being being shoved away. If you micromanage me, I'm an adult, I can't change a nappy, well, then I'm going to work where I feel competent. So it's a cycle, but I would agree the dads want to be involved. It's a beautiful generation of dads coming, and lucky babies, they can have both.
Yeah, I mean, agreed. I mean, like, I think as a dad, you almost like feel completely out of, like a fish out of water initially, but I think you do get it. And I remember, I mean, I read quite a few books, but then nothing prepares you for the actual experience, of doing this. Doesn't matter whether it's YouTube videos. But I remember, when Ingrid was pregnant with Kiara, we had a CEO and he was from HP at that time. And, certain people, when they say some things, it sticks with you. And I remember what he said. He said, it's never the same until it's your own. And it was so true. You can see, cousins, I saw my brother growing up because there was quite a big difference in age. But it's not the same when it's your own children. And yeah, there's a different like level to it, I think, which is quite cool. But I think with the stuff that you're doing, and I think from the first time that we actually crossed paths, I saw your domain and, it's birthsupport.co today. And I thought, wow, that's actually amazing. It's like, and, going onto your website in prep for this session as well, I really love it. So whoever did it, or if you did it, you can definitely see why someone would resonate to that, because it gives you almost everything that you do and the testimonials and how difficult the postnatal depression aspects are and the birth trauma. So yeah, well done for that, because I think it gives everyone a good sense of what it is to work with Sally Baker. Do you find that you get many referrals from that?
Yes. My website's a bit old and out of date. I used to get a lot of referrals. And it's nice for people to go check me out, because it's quite a thing. You're taking a fragile new you to go and expose yourself and say, I'm struggling, which you're not allowed to do in our society. I'm struggling as a mom. To somebody, it's nice to be able to check them out a little bit first. Because you're making yourself very vulnerable, but through being vulnerable, you get to become strong.
And also, I mean, you said it nicely, because it's almost like being the mum or the dad, you're supposed to know this, because now you're the mum or your dad. As you pass through that passage, now you're that person. But there's no training for it. Like, you didn't get qualified for it. You just like, now you're the mum or you're the dad, and you just kind of have to figure this out. And, thankfully there's grandparents normally around, because they show you that. But then, yeah, it's, there's a certain aspect to that where they become overbearing as well. So another aspect to it, and, like where they don't let the parents do, what they're supposed to do. But I think it's it's a interesting aspect around how that works. When we come to birth trauma, is it closely related to postnatal depression, or is it completely separate? I mean, so if you had postnatal depression, I mean, is that closely related then?
I don't know if you can say it's causal, so much as to say it's correlational. So, and different people are different. In the world of birth trauma, it's a very individual experience. It's how you experienced it, as opposed to what actually happened. So an event that is traumatizing for one may not be at all traumatizing for another. What we do often see, though, in our culture, because the focus is so much on the baby, is that we tend to minimize women's experiences by saying, but you have a healthy baby. Everything turned out fine. The baby is fine. What are you so upset about? So it's a very minimizing experience. And that in itself, being invisible, being unheard, being minimized, that is traumatizing. That is unsupportive.
Just on that, though, Sally, when people hear trauma, you kind of tend to think car accident or these kind of things. What would birth trauma most often be classified as? As a potential new mom, what would they kind of be warned about that could potentially be traumatic in giving birth?
Nice, complicated question. And yes, we used to think that trauma was big things like car accidents and wars and home invasions and things. But we're understanding more and more and more about trauma, that it is also the little things. And a little thing, being bullied at school, experiencing a parent's divorce, a midwife or a gynecologist who overrides your wishes and patronizes you and tells you just to be good and don't worry and, let him decide what it is he wants to do regardless of your wishes. That can be incredibly traumatizing because it's breaking your fundamental confidence as a mother, as a woman, as a person. So it's not just the big things.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I see Shaz is asking all those complicated questions. Eh?
I love it.
You were saying, Shaz?
Yeah, it does answer the question. Thanks, Sally, because I think it's important for new mothers or potential new parents to realize that trauma isn't necessarily baby's breached or you have to be rushed in for a C-section. There are so many other things that could result in trauma. And, sometimes a traumatic birth doesn't necessarily affect the baby, but it does affect the new parents. And people need to realize that as well. Like you say, instead of just saying, but, 10 fingers, 10 toes, healthy bouncing baby. Yeah, but I don't feel so great about the healthy bouncing baby because A, B, and C.
Yeah. I think we need to move away from just the physical well-being and include emotional and mental and spiritual well-being too. Does this mother walk out feeling whole? Can she walk out feeling, I did it, and it's a triumph? Or does she walk out feeling, I failed? There's a big difference there. And that will affect her relationship with her baby, her relationship with herself, her relationship with her partner. It's huge.
So, how do you support your clients, Sally, through that? So, if there is trauma, how would you help them then?
So it would depend on what the trauma is. Trauma there's many aspects to it. It can be expectations that led to that trauma. So thinking it would be natural and easy and, my baby would just breathe the baby out and everybody would behave in a certain way and then they don't. So that kind of catching up with the expectations and normalizing that, of course, you thought that. And that's okay. So with compassionate listening, getting to there. Sometimes it's working with the body. If the body is traumatized, was too overwhelmed, there was surgery involved, it was just too much on the body, there can be actually physical trauma, which we need to deal with, maybe with somatic therapies or things like brain spotting or EMI or BWRT. There are brain therapies that can also help with that link between the body and the brain. And then a big one is just listening. Just listening to a woman's story without coming in with my story or asking questions or wanting to tell her that, no, but this could have happened and that, and my uncle's brothers, sisters, cousins, nephew, none of that. Just listen. We don't really, I think women have to process, they don't have to, but they often process their births on Facebook, which means put you open to people's their stories. Nobody's actually listening to you. So having a space, I offer something called a birth story listening, a 90-minute session, and I listen. I really listen. We listen to your experience. Where else do you have a space where you can just talk? We no longer have the elder on the corner of the village that you go to afterwards to listen and hold this incredible experience that holds the joys, the magic, the frightening, the overwhelming, the painful, the magnificent, the survival. Who does that? I try to do that.
That is amazing. And I think that's what we aiming to achieve, with this show in particular, is to put put those options out there to people and say there are actually options, because I'm not sure, you said you have a referral network and people kind of find you in certain ways, but I've often said in many of the other episodes, no one teaches you this stuff, and sometimes I find, especially with healthcare practitioners, it's they have a wealth of knowledge, but it's all it's tied to some diagnosis code or some way that you speak, the certain lingo, and it's normally not that accessible. And I think what I love about what you said so far, it seems very down to earth and effective. It seems like this is what it needs to be, and this is how I support the clients around it. And going with what you were saying about the strong communities and stuff like that, is I don't know if it's a generational thing as well, but we have less of those matriarchs and patriarchs in society. And I think at some stage you said the the village elder, and it's almost like everyone expects you to be like independent and expects you to be self-sufficient and stuff like that. And I think to a certain extent, that's how society is, or that's how work is and stuff like that. But there's definitely a need for exactly what you're saying right now, and maybe more support groups, more ways that people know that this, if you're struggling with these, and that's what I'm trying to get with these episodes as well, is that if you find these markers, if you find, okay, you resonate with what Sally's saying right now, or my wife is going through something right now, and it seems to be that we possibly need assistance, then you put up your hand and you say, okay, cool, maybe I should just reach out to Sally for a conversation, and let's see where that goes. Or you can go onto her amazing website and it's like, okay, cool, that makes sense. I would really like to sign up for those classes because that makes sense. So yeah, I think that, that's where we're kind of going with this. And I'm really glad that we're getting practitioners like yourself, on board, because I think this is a part that I've found was missing, is the accessibility of information, because you do get information. You just have to go onto Google and you just put in whatever terms that you want, but often you don't know what to ask. It's like exactly like like that 1.5 hour session with your clients. Just leaving that space open so that they can ask some the right questions, or say the things that are on their minds. And I find, that's the worst thing. And I have a lot of respect for people that put out all of these really sensitive topics on Facebook, because I just read something on I Love 4Ways just now, and the lady was talking about some traumatic stuff. And she said it quite nicely, because she was posting on behalf of a client, I think. And she says, please don't turn this into a soap opera, because that's exactly what happens. Someone posts something, and then there's a thread of like 200 comments, and some of them are quite nasty. I don't know how people put that in words, but for it to be there forever. But I think having that safe space, which is what I think you're saying, I think should definitely help clients, with that stuff. So over and above, so what I take from that is, you have the individual, sessions, you also have the classes. Is there anything else that we should have asked you around postnatal depression or birth trauma that we should have covered?
It's a topic I can talk about for days and days and days. I would say to find the people that you can talk to, that tell you the truth and that are honest with you. And it's unlikely you're going to find that in Hello Magazine or on Instagram. So just be careful, because that's the fitting into the perfectionist. I call it lying. It's an illusion. Omission is a lie. So for me, it's omission. And then surround yourself by people who are more truth-telling. So looking at websites and blogs that are more telling the truth, but with a solution focus. I would say, but also be very careful who and what you expose yourself to. Even those stories you were talking about now, Oliver, if I can just say, why do people tell scary birth stories? And they tell them because they're trying to process them. They're trying to make sense of them. They're not integrated yet. They're still stuck in the trauma of it. And somebody who's still pregnant and going through this does not need to hear that unprocessed, all over the place story. So I think it's quite important to protect yourself from that. I kind of say to them, thank you, but right now I cannot hear to you. Why don't you go see a therapist? And of course, if it's a birth trauma one, go see Sally, or any other therapist for that matter. And when you're in a resolved through a process stage, like a grandmother, then she doesn't need to tell it to you anymore. She can tell you the pieces that you need to hear, that are medicine for you, that can help. So whenever somebody does tell you a difficult birth trauma, postnatal trauma story that they tell you, I would suggest to moms, say to them, so how did you get through that? So what did you do to cope with that? Because that's useful information. Hearing the drama, not useful. But how did you cope? Now that's important. Now you've changed the conversation. Is that, I don't know if that can be something
That
helpful.
answers it completely. Sorry, Shaz, just to finish off on that. Yeah, that answers it completely. And I think, I mean, which is quite interesting for, I think elders in the community or in the family, because people forget, so these things are not often chronicled. It's almost like, age and time makes it seem easier. And, it's almost like they didn't go through the same trauma, or they didn't go through the same experiences or difficulties. My gran, as an example, I can't remember how many children she had now, but it was like she was, every 2 years she had a child, and I can't even imagine that. We've got 2 kids, and I can't imagine her having 9 kids. I think that's what it is, 9 kids. But and so 18 years of her life, she was constantly giving birth or in that process. And so when she talks about it, she almost like she would talk about a very high level, but I don't know if that was useful, to her children or grandchildren. So I think with that, I mean, there's definitely almost like age helps with that. But to get that, that real, what you just said now, it's like, how did you get through that? I think it would be amazing if that could be passed on, because, maybe, it's not as easily accessible even from the person telling the story. So you do need something maybe more recent. I don't know if you find anything like that. I mean, or do you find that, elders are the sage of wisdom?
It's a mixture. Elders can also have their own traumas. Who listen to them? Who help them process it? We're all wounded in some way by wounded parents wounding our children. It's the cycle continues. Where we can interrupt it is by compassionately going on an exploration journey of who am I? Who do I want to be as a mother? So this birth crisis that comes in parenting, that can either be this thing which you are like, how do I get this right? Which is not possible, by the way. A perfect parent isn't the best what you want. You want a good enough, present, trying, real parent. So if I invite mums, I often call myself a motherhood mentor, I invite them to use this as a heroine's journey and get to know themselves. That baby's pushing buttons. That baby is scratching on old wounds. Do we just want to put a bigger plaster on or numb it out? Or do we go heal? Because if we heal, our parenting heals, our children heal. They now know it goes backwards too. The elders also heal. So it's a different tone. It's rather than saying what's wrong with you, let's fix it. We're kind of saying what happened to you, let's support you.
That, I think, is what actually hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of people over the last few days have definitely been reading about Lauren Dickerson. And the really sad fact there is when you start looking back at it, you have to really start asking, I mean, what pushes a mom to that point where she actually can't carry on anymore? And what you're saying is exactly that. There's no support, what's happening? How can we help you? How did you get through it? Instead, it's that expectation of, but you should be able to do this. And if we go back, there are so often stories that you read of, a mom just, that's it. I can't anymore. And then she's vilified. And that for me is always the really sad fact of it is firstly, no matter whatever happens, the thought that you have to live the rest of your life knowing that you have killed your kids is torture enough. But now you become this villain, and it's not that. Actually, all you needed was somebody to put their hand up and say, "How can I help you?" And hopefully, as we go along and more people start understanding that postnatal depression and traumatic birth and all of this, we need to be there to support people to prevent instances like what's happened in New Zealand now. I think, and my only hope, like I'm saying, is, as you say, that we just start building those support structures and actually supporting new moms or, any parent to make that transition of, I'm now a parent. And it is a transition from being a parent of one child to being a parent of two children, or in some cases, my mother-in-law, both her births were multiple births. So, you're expecting one baby and there's an ultrasound that suddenly says, okay, but there's 3 heartbeats. But that in itself has got to be terrifying. Yeah, so
I agree with you, Shaz. This needs to be a community responsibility towards mothers and their children, not an individual responsibility. Maybe part of it also would be we're not really talking about it because we don't really know, but we could almost build in part of that normalizing. We could build in by acknowledging the things that people are going through. So the level of stress, all of us, the level of stress is just crazy living in Joburg in South Africa. Then throw in COVID, it's up another level. Now you're having a baby. There can be so many extra stresses and silent losses there. The amount of miscarriages that people have that nobody talks about, where do they process that? That's huge. If you've lost a baby, if your baby has got any problems with it, if the scan, which is supposed to be this wonderful, exciting process, lands up showing, oh no, there could be a problem, or even a false positive, taking you on that roller coaster ride of there could be something wrong with my baby. This is hugely traumatizing. Any other problems in the pregnancy, there's so many things that can happen. Then in the birth, if the birth doesn't go as planned, there can be concerns for the baby there. If the baby's heartbeat isn't right, if there's concerns with the mother's health, these are huge. If the baby needs extra help afterwards, or baby goes to ICU to the neonatal ICU for a little while, that's really, really hard for parents. If there's problems with breastfeeding or feeding the baby, can you see this? And this we just, people have to deal with this. This is huge. This causes struggles. How can you expect somebody to cope with this on their own?
You said it so nicely. And sorry, Sally, you were saying?
No.
Yeah.
I'm done.
So what I wanted to say was, I like what you said about the process, and I think that's what people forget as well. It's a process. There's no end goal to it. It's almost like you need to be in that moment. You need to do the best. Well, this is my philosophy. You need to do the best that you can right now. With the information that you have, with the tools that you have, with the support structure, and then that should be good enough. But often what we do is we try to come up with this perfect picture. Especially I find with entrepreneurs as well. It's about the revenue, it's about this, and it's about that, and it's like sometimes you're never going to get there. But if you're not enjoying that process, what's the point anyway? It's like because you're almost always stuck with this unfulfilled feeling. Is that something that's or more or less in line with what you were saying?
Oh, I agree. It would be so wonderful if we could be present in the moment, doing what we need to do in the moment. And that's enough. But that's not really how we live our lives. We have these expectations. And I would also say that new parents suffer from what I call humble pie eating, which is all the things they judged when they were before they knew any better. The screaming kid on the airplane, the tired child in the supermarket. We've all seen it, right? At the restaurant, the baby who won't keep quiet. We've all said, no, my child will never do that. I would never handle that. That's humble. And then us social workers and teachers and, people who work with children, we got a double dose of that lot. That is a huge process in eating that humble pie with grace and giving yourself permission to have said, I didn't know. It was easy to be an expert until I actually had the baby. and to kindly and compassionately work yourself through that. Because the more kindness and compassion you can find for yourself, the more chance you have of finding it for your baby and your partner and your whole family.
I'm glad you said that last part as well. Compassion starts with you first, because I think I can't remember the saying completely, but it's like often, if you said what you say to yourself in your head, to other people, you probably won't have any friends, something to that effect. But
you wouldn't.
You
wouldn't. You would never talk to somebody else like that.
No, definitely. And I think that's what people forget. You have to start with yourself. And, the saying I always say is like, on the airplane, they always tell you, put your life jacket on first, if there's a problem, and then you help someone else. And I think people forget that. They're all like busy helping everyone else, and then they don't really help themselves. So, and it always starts here first, and then, you can kind of see what capacity you have. And obviously that does something for your own soul as well. But what you said about the humble pie, I can, and Shaz can probably attest to this. I don't think we've heard a practitioner say that, but my mom used to say that all the time. She would always say, "Don't point the finger because you don't know." And she would tell us this, obviously, as a, like in a, like a negative aspect, but she didn't want it to come true. She would say, "I don't know what my kids are going to do when they grow up," and so it would always be this reverse psychology kind of thing. But it's so true. It's like you can never judge that stuff because you don't know how it turns out, and you just have to do, the best that you can with that. So coming back to it, Shez, on your side, is there anything else that we had for Sally to understand the area of interest, or something that we missed that we should have asked her?
I think we covered everything. I think the only other one that I did want to ask is, so a traumatic birth, does that only affect the mother, or is there a possibility that this could also affect the child or the father?
Again, it defines what trauma. It depends on what trauma. But if she's experienced, or she would say, "I had a traumatic birth," whether she puts that into words or not, I would say it would affect, even if it's just on a relationship point of view, because something that trauma does is shut down your body, shut down your system. It activates the fight, flight, defense mechanisms. And if that doesn't work, it then goes to like this resignation, prepared to die. I'm numb, I'm cold, I'm alone, I'm isolated, helpless, hopeless. That's going to impact on how you relate to people, how you relate to your baby, how you're able to relate to yourself. So from that perspective, most definitely would affect the whole family. The father can also have an experience in the pregnancy, the birth afterwards. Feeling helpless is not good for any humans. And a dad or a father, partner, who's not able to protect his wife or his partner, protect his baby, that also leaves him feeling helpless. That can also create things. We, I think, sometimes are not in the birth world sensitive enough to what fathers are experiencing, and sometimes expose them to things that maybe they are not really prepared for or adequately supported through. So that can also be very, very traumatizing. And then I think the babies can have their own experiences. There won't be words, there won't be stories. The baby's not going to, I was sent to ICU and I was all alone and my mommy wasn't with me. That's not what the baby's experiencing. The mother and the father are experiencing that, but not the baby. The baby, we don't know. The baby is experiencing a physical experience. In that instance, I would say to parents, don't underestimate the connection you can have with your baby, even if you're not physically there. You can stay connected, whether you're in that room holding hands or not.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I remember Kiara used to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Go to bed like perfect, 2 o'clock in the morning for some reason, just screaming her guts off. And it's difficult in that moment. But I think you do your best to be connected and be present in that moment. But Sally, on your side, obviously we're going to include all of your details, and I think anyone listening to this would have gotten a good sense of how you can assist them, or what markers those would be. And obviously we'll link to your really cool website. Is there anything else on your side that you would say to anyone that's listening to this and probably, says, actually, I should make an appointment with Sally, or I need more information or anything like that? And then we can close off.
I would say if you're a parent or a sister or a grandmother or a mother and you're thinking you need help, you probably do. So give that to yourself if you can. Your own mental health and your own health is as important. It's amazing how people will spend money on the baby, but not on themselves. So let's also reorganize that. And if you're a caregiver listening to this, let's ask the questions. Let's find out, how are our moms and dads really doing? And let's help where we can.
Very, very nicely said. I mean, I just wrote down probably pamper package for parents or mom or dad, rather than you always get gifts for the babies. And that's actually so true. You never get gifts for the parents or the mum.
Food. Take food. Cooked, real food. Not Woolies. We can all go buy that. Food. A cooked meal. That's worth a lot. Because often you can't say to the parents, what do you need? They don't know. They're just trying to survive. But take a meal. Drop it off, wash the dishes and leave.
I love that. I mean, you can see how actionable you are, though, because that is so true, because that has the love aspect to it. It has the care aspect to it. And it's actually you just care. You just, you do care about the person that's there. Yeah, because I think most people inherently they just say, no, I don't need anything. But you're absolutely right. And sometimes it's just being there, not doing anything. Like you said, just be there and just support in the best way that you can. Or, just say, if there's anything you need, let me know. But
I would suggest to offer things rather than ask her, because you're putting the onus on the person who needs the help to decide and know. It's probably easier to kind of say, can I do some shopping for you? Do you need some toilet paper? Can I bring you a meal? Would you like me to hold the baby so you can sleep? Would you like me to run you a bath? Give some ideas, because that's much easier for somebody to say yes or no than to think, well, actually, I need this. How am I going to ask?
Okay, again, I mean, very actionable. I love that. But you can see you've done this before. I'll be like, obviously you can prompt it in the right way. And I'm sure that's what your clients really love, is that you can give them something actionable that they can actually, work through. I love this entire conversation. Thanks again for doing this. I mean, I think it gives us a really good, balance to the show as well, which I really like. And if there's anything else, I mean, let's pick up a discussion on something else that we could probably help listeners with. But I love this, and let's close it off there. Thanks again for being on the show. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you, Shay. Thank you for having me and talking about this, a very important topic to me.
Thanks very much, Sally. It was amazing chatting to you about this.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. As always, stay tuned, and we'll speak to you in the next episode.